What most churches are doing is absolutely terrifying, and Christians don't see it coming. What they're doing to their congregations is like taking a newborn baby, a cute little baby, and placing it in the middle of a busy freeway while an 18-wheeler is coming barreling down the road. It's not the way to treat a baby or a congregation. That truck is the kingdom that churches are supposed to be preparing their congregations for. But instead of riding the truck, congregations are going to be run over by it. This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters, and today we're asking, are you attending one of these churches, and what should you do about it? At the end of this teaching, we're going to give you 2 solid pieces of advice of what to do right now. What many churches are doing is also similar to what our public school system is doing to our children, indoctrinating them into a system that isn't godly, indoctrinating them into what will ultimately harm them. And today, that's what we're going to unpack, because what's being done to believers absolutely terrifies me. Let's talk about that truck analogy first. 6 months ago, we did a survey of 4,500 respondents on my YouTube channel about what churches are teaching. 75% of our viewers said that their church, or most churches, were asleep about the end times. As those are the days that are coming barreling down the road right at us. In fact, a third of our viewers said they no longer attend church at all for that very reason. A third of our viewers have dropped out. And this exactly matches what a recent Lifeway survey of pastors of evangelical and traditionally black churches had to say about how important they thought Bible prophecy was. Less than a third thought Revelation or the Old Testament was, quote, very important, and less than a third thought it very important that they study prophecy themselves. This response was despite the fact that another recent Lifeway survey said 56% of those same pastors thought Jesus was returning in their lifetime. And 9 out of 10 thought events taking place in the world right now were signs of Jesus' soon return. 9 out of 10. So stop right there. Can you see the disconnect? How can 56% of pastors think they'll see Jesus' return soon, and yet only half that number think prophecy is very important or want to study it? That means they don't think there is anything in those prophecies that their congregations really need to know. Did they think God gave us those prophecies for no reason at all? Now that is terrifying. It is the blind who haven't studied or understood prophecy leading the blind. And that's how the baby ends up in the middle of the freeway, ready to get run over by a truck barreling down the road. The truck is coming. It's our job to protect everyone from it. And that's why you watch this channel, because you want to understand the scriptures in a way you don't get elsewhere, so that the truck doesn't hit you. And we help build hope in you so that you can face these things. So consider subscribing to this channel so you can get more information about subjects just like this, and hope like you're going to get at the end of the video. Now, in regard to our churches, 100 million USA churchgoers give about $75 billion a year to this cause. They support an infrastructure of buildings and staff that, for the most part, are not preparing them for this very important subject. And here's a big surprise. You aren't expecting this, but what is most important isn't knowing when things take place. The things that we can and do argue about. You know what I'm talking about. Pre-trib, post-trib, pre-wrath. But it's what we need to be doing, regardless of when things happen. How we need to be living to prepare ourselves. Something that really shouldn't be controversial at all. I mean, it's just living the normal Christian life as the Bible explains it. But that is being ignored in some important ways also. And that terrifies me. Here's an important example of what's being ignored. It's like what the public schools are doing, teaching a worldly approach to life. Unfortunately, we're also getting that in our churches. This example is a verse that very few churches preach and teach about but which is incredibly applicable. 1 John 2:15 through 16 reads, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him." So, someone saved if the love of the Father is not in him? "For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh," that's the sin nature, "the desires of the eyes," which is the love of your possessions, and the pride of life, which is pride in how we look and our jobs and our positions, etc., is not from the Father, but is from the world. So the Apostle John tells us that life is a dichotomy. It's either love of the Father or love of the world, one or the other. And this love of the world is exactly what the world system will use as leverage against us. If you're loving the things of this world, cars, houses, fancy meals, your job, your looks, these are things that Satan is planning to tempt you with in the years prior to Jesus' return. We are all going to have to make a hard choice in those years. Either hold on to the things of this world or stay faithful to Jesus. We likely can't have both. Let me say that again. We likely can't have both. So are you being prepared for that? Because Satan is going to progressively offer to let you keep those things of the world, but only if you worship him and conform to this world system. Most haven't realized that this is the major threat of the last days. You can already see this happening in the business world, where they're forcing what's called the ESG system, environment, social governance, on businesses, just as the World Economic Forum has promoted. This is why corporations, big corporations like Target and Budweiser, are putting out advertisements that cause them to lose money and following. This would normally make no sense at all for-profit companies, but if ESG scores drop, companies will lose their investors and maybe even their access to banks and suppliers. So even though their customers don't like what they're doing and buy fewer products, the world system does like it. And the long-term outlook for these companies, they will do better if they go along with the world system. The companies are bending their knee to Satan and this system. Now, I hope you realize churches will soon have to conform to this ESG system as well. And they have built an infrastructure, as we said, that is dependent on money to support it. As we said, they have an infrastructure that takes $75 billion a year to support, pay salaries, pay mortgages, etc. And banks and other suppliers will soon close their doors to churches that don't comply with the ESG. And you think this isn't going to happen? A famous internet doctor, Dr. Joseph Mercola, recently had his company banned by the bank on July 13th, 2023, just a short time ago. Informed Mercola that they were closing all his business accounts, along with his personal accounts and the personal accounts of his CEO, his CFO, and their respective spouses and children. Even their young children were informed they would never be allowed to bank with in the future. All of this because of Mercola's political views. Now, this won't be limited to businesses. All Christians will face similar choices in the very near future. As we reported previously on this channel, digital currency will morph into a system where it's allocated, not earned. Allocated by means of the social credit system, much like an ESG system that businesses are now using. So how much money you have will be dependent on whether or not you bend your knee to the world system and its values, which of course are Satan's values. If Christians love what their money can buy or their status more than they love the Father, they will bend their knees to that system. We call that apostasy. Eventually, this will mean denying the Father and the Son, and eventually, beyond that, eternal death. Don't pastors see this coming? No, I personally don't think they do. And even if they do, they don't seem to think it's a big problem. Don't love the things of the world isn't controversial at all from a biblical perspective. It's completely biblical, except most churches don't give this anything but lip service. Why? I don't know why. I am only guessing, but it seems possible that it's the fact that churches need money. Money in order to support their big infrastructure of buildings and staff. Many, if not most churches, act as if they're businesses, telling people to devalue their finances and things isn't going to promote higher giving. It will most likely promote much lower giving. That, of course, won't support the infrastructure. Now, I don't want to pick on any pastor in particular, because it could be a multitude of pastors feeling this way. But here is what a world-famous teacher, Randy Alcorn, thinks about 1 John 2:15 that we quoted before. He was asked in a blog to comment on this verse. Listen to the question and then carefully listen to his answer. Here's the question. What exactly does it mean to love not the world nor the things of the world? I hear it preached from time to time, the blog commenter went on, but no one seems to have the courage to tell us what it really means. Wow, that's a great and timely question. Notice the person who's asking the question assumes it's going to take courage to preach it right. Now here's Alcorn's, in my opinion, incomplete answer. In terms of what that practically means, I think it involves not being mesmerized by popular culture. One of the negative things that I see in the American church today is its preoccupation with pop culture. It's become so much a part of us that we tend to be immersed in exactly the same thing as the people around us. Now that's completely true, but it's pretty weak and an incomplete answer, not courageous, especially in a world system that will soon give you a chance to conform and be rewarded, or not conform and potentially lose everything that you've worked for just to stay faithful to the Father. Now, teaching that would be courageous. So where is the hope? What is a Christian to do about these two factors? Churches that don't teach about the end times and don't prepare you spiritually for the difficult choices you're going to have to make. I like the idea of reverse engineering. Imagine yourself in a world system that will rise in the next few years and decide what you should do now to overcome those times before they start. So, the easy answer seems to be to just leave your congregation like a third of our listeners have. I personally don't recommend leaving your church that you're attending. Instead, I recommend you stay there, at least for the time being, and try to be an influence on those around you. A positive influence. I also recommend you start your own underground house church. And you're probably thinking, Nelson, are you crazy? No, I'm completely serious. Even if you don't feel competent to start a house church, it is the biblical model from the book of Acts. Believers in the early church met house to house. In the near future, your Sunday church may make that big ESG compromise that we've been talking about, and you'll be glad for the dozen or so people that are meeting at your home. This is what I do personally. Second, I recommend you start living more frugally and begin devaluing the things of this world in both your heart and your mind. You are going to eventually lose these things anyway, so start devaluing them now. If you don't value them in the future, you won't mind giving them up when faced with that hard choice that we talked about that's coming. I think Christians also miss that the world system is going to begin to bribe those who stay in worldly churches, who conform to the ESG, to turn in and betray those who are faithful believers. Click right here to keep watching and discover how digital currency is going to make that easier for that betrayal to happen. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.